Bush now?
Bushnell, thank
Yep.
you. I've got the Bush part, the rest of us have a couple of readings. Thank you for being here all alone. You don't have a group of people, so I pity you. Based on the passion tonight, I'd be like, I'm leaving now. It's time to go. So, I used to teach math before I had my kids, so I would say, No Child Left Behind era, 2006 was the last time I taught. I have done some subbing in Post Falls School District, and my opinion of Common Core is kind of formed around that because I taught before Common Core. So I taught pre-algebra. I subbed a lot at Lake City Post Falls Middle School, and I was really disappointed in the math. I think some of the other people that have subbed have seen that, where not everyone's equal in their math skills, just like everyone doesn't come out with the same math and reading when they start off in school. I was seeing some of that, not necessarily in what the teacher's notes were or how the kids were working, but it didn't seem like there was a lot of flexibility for some people are gonna struggle with math, you know, and some people are gonna be a better test taker than others. And I also didn't like the ISAT. I subbed. I wasn't actually in the classroom, but I was helping with some stuff subbing on one of those days. And just because you do bad on your ISAT doesn't mean you don't know your math or any other subject. It just means you're a lousy test taker. And I really get concerned with that. Even at my kids' school, I've opted to not have them in public school for many reasons I won't get into here. And that really, really concerned me that I feel like Common Core, the textbooks in particular, and the standards in the curriculum are making it harder for the teachers to do their job. Because I see there's good teachers at each school, because at each school there's always gonna be teachers that care more than others. Some teachers are better than others at their particular subject, and I think it's a burden to the teachers in the way it's written currently. I would prefer it be done away with, written less by administrators, more written, you know, with parents in mind and with people that are on the ground in the classroom kind of people. Because the people that have the PhDs in education are not the ones that know how to teach third grade. My only other comment would be is I had subbed in I would think it was an advanced placement or an honors class at Post Falls High School, and instead of reading Romeo and Juliet or some of the more classics, they were reading The Hunger Games, and it was required. I don't think it was an optional thing on their curriculum, and that just floored me. I've read it multiple times. I've seen all the movies. I love the book. I would not want my kid as a freshman at Post Falls High School, because that's where he would go if I was in the public school system. I would not want him to be in that book. So I don't know if that's more curriculum than thoroughness, because I feel like I'm more in the thoroughness and in the math area. But to just take that into consideration, that I think we need to not, I feel like it's just trying to reinvent the wheel over and over again, and there are certain teaching things that don't change over time. Some of them we learn from, but like with math, there's not some newfangled way to teach math. There's 2 or 3 ways to teach certain parts of math, and that's it. Those don't change. That's a very, very static subject. And when I see these examples of Common Core math online, it just worries me, and I hope you guys will pay more attention to that. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Norma White. Oh, hello. Norma White, and I think I broke the mic, huh? To get in here to the notes. Okay, I'm not a teacher, but I do have a master's degree in public policy, and I attained that without the benefit of Common Core standards. Now, it is my understanding that the Common Core State Standards Initiative still exists in Idaho as the Common Core State Standards Initiative still lists Idaho as a Common Core adoption state. However, Idaho's Public Superintendent of Public Education claims the Department of Education got rid of Common Core. If that is the case, why are the Idaho content standards virtually identical to the Common Core standards that were first adopted in 2011? A simple side-by-side comparison shows this to be the case. This being the case, it appears that a fraud has been perpetrated upon the citizens of Idaho by the Superintendent of Public Education and the Department of Education. It is my educated opinion that educational standards promulgated upon a fraud should be immediately eliminated. Furthermore, the National Assessment of Education Progress reveals that overall, Idaho students aren't faring any better under the adopted standards than they were before the adoption of the standards. Please explain why Idahoans should continue throwing good money after bad for standards that are failing our students. Thank you.
Robert White. I'm asking you to repeal all Common Core, new Idaho content standards, and anything that has to do with this. So all those initiatives up there, I'm totally against. And I'm asking you to repeal them all. I would like to know, when I spend thousands of dollars in my tax money every year, and what am I getting for it? Because when I look at these children that are coming out of school, they can't read, they can't do math, they can't spell, they can't even think. I go, what, something in the air or something? I mean, they can't do science, they can't communicate. I've been a general contractor for almost 40 years. And when I see these kids come out, or if I'm at the store and they're a cashier or something, and they can't do basic math, there's something wrong. And when I try to explain to them how to do the math and show them, it seems like they're from another planet. They're not tracking. And one of the things in construction that was always important, that we all be on the same standard in communication with words and math and how we look at things in construction. And when we have these kids coming out, they're not on board. They can't even comprehend what we're talking about anymore. And I think this has really done a great disservice of seeing these children become adults and they can't even work in the workplace. And when I see businesses and all these people that are hiring these kids having to retrain these kids after spending all this money on these kids and having to be retrained, there's something really wrong. And we're really done a disservice to these kids. When I look at kids that are homeschoolers or from the Christian academies and stuff, I'm able to have a conversation with these kids. When I look at the public schools, I can't have conversations, I can't communicate. There's something really wrong. And I keep on going back to Common Core is the problem. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Karen Lauritsen, and I am speaking to Rules Governing Thoroughness. I am one of 2 public school teachers who have spoken tonight, and I feel that I have the ability to actually speak to what Common Core standards look like inside a classroom, because I spend my days inside a classroom with actual students. And so I feel that I actually am able to speak to that. One of the things is I've been teaching for 18 years, and when I first started teaching, I taught in Anchorage, Alaska on an Air Force base. One of the things that I noticed when I taught on that Air Force base was we didn't have Common Core standards. We didn't have common standards at all. And I saw students come from all 50 states with 50 sets of standards. And at my school, it was very challenging to meet the needs of children, which we had about 500 children at that school who came with 50 sets of standards. When children come with that many different sets of standards and that many different needs, a second grader is not a second grader. A second grader from Georgia comes with completely different education than a student who comes from Alaska, where I was. And a second grader from Florida had completely different education. It was very difficult to meet their needs. One of the good things about the Common Core standards is it levels the playing field for children. We are right next door to the state of Washington. Our students are constantly going across the border, back and forth, to different states, to Montana, to Washington. And we know that when our students go from state to state, the standards go with them. We know that when they go from second grade to second grade, the standards that they're learning from each state are the same. And that's fair, and that is good for students. A lot of the misconceptions about the Common Core that you hear are that it's a curriculum, that we are teaching about specific religions, and we're teaching about specific things. You know that's not true. These are a set of standards where children are learning certain things, and the curriculums that are used to teach them are different. But as a teacher, I appreciate that I have the flexibility within my classroom to teach those standards in the way that my school district sees fit. We do have that local control to teach that curriculum the way that we see fit at the Post Falls School District where I teach. I appreciate that. What I do also appreciate with the Common Core standards is that we have the collaboration around the state of Idaho, but I can also collaborate with teachers across the nation on second grade standards. I'm not reinventing the wheel like I did 18 years ago, where Alaska had certain standards, Georgia had standards, New York had different standards, and every teacher in that state had to completely make their own ways to teach that curriculum to those different standards. We can collaborate all across the nation, and that is exceedingly helpful. The rigor of the standards that I have seen in 18 years is amazing. The things that our children can do from when I started teaching till now because of the Common Core standards is incredible. And if the children that people are seeing don't reflect that, I'm amazed, because the students in my classroom and the students that I see in the Post Falls School District are so impressive because of the rigor of the Common Core standards. The Common Core standards have also allowed students to be much more developed in their understanding of nonfiction text. That was not true 18 years ago. It was so heavy in fiction text. Students are much more understanding of those types of texts. I was terrible at math growing up because my teachers taught me one way to do it, and if I didn't get it, shut up. You didn't get it the way I taught you, move on. Sorry, I only know how to teach you one way. That's not true these days. Okay, and I just would like to say I appreciate the Common Core standards and the brave teachers that I teach with who impress me every day.
Good job.
Tony Wisniewski.
My name is Tony Wisniewski. I'm from Post Falls, and I'd like to address the rules governing thoroughness. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. These are the opening words of Charles Dickens' book, A Tale of Two Cities. These words have double significance today. The best of times for our educational system was in the 1960s, when the United States was looked upon as the gold standard of the world. Sadly, the worst of times started with the establishment of the Federal Department of Education in 1979 under President Jimmy Carter. The local control enjoyed by the thousands of independent school districts began to erode, and now the one-size-fits-all program of Common Core has stagnated and reversed educational excellence compared to the rest of the world. Now the United States ranks mediocre at best in all areas of learning. We rank slightly better than the Czech Republic and Latvia in science. We lie between Slovakia and Croatia in math, and we're tied with Portugal and Spain in the reading areas. Our technological superiority is being carried forward by inertia and the fact that we still have a relatively strong free market system. The second reference to the best and worst of times is the fact that classical literature is being reduced by as much as 50% in the kindergarten through 5th grade, and instructional texts are being substituted. These may be short biographies, speeches, or technical articles that may reflect the type of reading the student may have outside the school environment. However, these reading snippets are easy to manipulate toward a philosophical bent. An overwhelming majority of high school graduates know that Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner, but less than a third know that he was the author of the Declaration of Independence and a president of our country. They are led to believe that slavery is an institution developed by the United States. The Israelites in bondage in Egypt is not discussed. The Romans, Goths, Vandals, no offense, Bill, Incas, Mayas, Aztecs, and American Indians is similarly not discussed in relationship to taking of slaves. According to the Idaho State Department of Education report just issued last week, 30% of third grade students were not proficient in reading, as shown by the Idaho Reading Indicator. If a child cannot read well by the third grade, he will struggle with the rest of his academic and probably professional career. A white paper published by the Pioneer Institute had this to say about Common Core English Language Arts programs. Its secondary English language arts standards were not developed or approved by English teachers and humanities scholars, nor were they research-based or internationally benchmarked. Dr. Louisa Moats is an internationally renowned reading expert who served as a contributor to the Common Core's literacy standards. Even then, she saw that the mismatch between Common Core reading standards and young students' ability to cope with the material would cause major problems. The sight word approach seeks to have children memorize whole words using their visual memory. And she says, quote, "But this is not how a good reader reads," she explained. There is lots of evidence showing this, including studies about what happens in the brain as children learn to read. It is a myth that children learn irregular words or learn any words by sight. They just don't. I'd like to relate one anecdote in closing. A friend of mine in the early 80s lamented to me that he had been cheated in school. He had just found out about phonics being reintroduced into California schools. He had been taught to read using the whole word approach, which is like trying to read Chinese characters by rote instead of sounding out words. Professor James Milgram, professor of mathematics at Stanford University, was the only math expert involved in the development of the math portion of Common Core. He refused to approve Common Core when he saw how inferior the math standards were and predicted that it would set students back at least 2 years compared to European and Asian students. Would you buy a Ford vehicle if the chief engineer for the transmission refused to sign off on the design? My friend's ability to do modestly well in his engineering career was probably because he was more conversant in his second language, which he learned in school very well. That language was mathematics. I am afraid that if he had been trained under the Common Core standards, his career and his life would not have turned out as well.
Harry Seymour.
I'm not going to repeat what has been said by others. I listened to everybody speak and I pretty much agree. I'm going to speak on behalf of just as a parent whose child has, as a parent whose child has gone to school with Common Core. She just recently, I've had 3 children go through school, and all 3 of them have graduated. My last one just graduated, and she really struggled with Common Core. I was on the school board for a time, for 4 years, when Common Core was coming out, and I'm not for it. Everybody that has spoken tonight has already said what I wanted to say. I want to speak as far as the child who has cried and sat at the table while I've cried with her also, because she's so frustrated and wanted to quit school, and it was my job to get her to graduate. She won't go to college now because she hates school so bad, and I know too many other people who feel the same way and have struggled with their children. And we have some great teachers in our city and all around. And I'm not saying anything bad about the teachers, because they work hard and they do their jobs and they're trying to help these children. But when a child is dropping out of school and does drugs, and in our society today they have so much pressure. As a parent, I just don't agree. I think it needs to be focused on, and also the parents being able to not know Common Core ourselves, and it's so frustrating to us. I guess we should go back to grade school. But anyway, I hand it to the teachers for at least trying. But the child, I'm thinking of the child and the frustration and the parents. Yeah.
Barbara.
To Barbara Heading, I also agree with what has been said previously against Common Core, and I just won't reiterate what has already been said, so thank you very much.
Ralph.
Like, who's in the cookie? Ralph Genorio. I'm Ralph Genorio. I'm a professional teacher. I taught in public schools until 2014. Now I teach at the Coeur d'Alene Charter Academy. Ms. Bent, thank you for coming tonight. I intend to speak to issues 2, uniformity, 3, thoroughness, and 4, public charter schools. As to uniformity, the Constitution, which is taught as part of public school standards, Common Core, and state standards, gives no role to the federal government to set curricula. It is an overreach. It was allowed because of bureaucracy and politics, but there is no single magic bullet in schools. Education is not a science, it's an art. My colleagues who disagree with me about Common Core and have spoken eloquently and passionately tonight are able to reach their kids because teaching involves an intimate association of 3 truths. The truth that we teach, the truth of ourselves and what we bring to the table, and the truth of each of the kids in front of us. And the conceit of any broad system of standards, whether you call it Common Core or No Child Left Behind, is that important people do not do field work. Honestly, the education system, like the Defense Department, is a product of increasing centralization and bureaucracy. Yes, there were schools in the 1980s where you could teach the same thing to a school student and have them move across the country and get the next lesson. From Vladivostok to Bialystok in the Soviet Union, a single set of standards, one size fits all. The Common Core system cannot work because ultimately it treats people like cogs in a machine. I know my job better than anyone. I am at the peak of my abilities as a man and as a teacher. I teach Western civilization and its history, and I moved 3,000 miles to come here because the schools of Maine, like many schools around the country, had become entrapped by a system of central control by bureaucratic design. We have schools to teach citizens, and yet our schools have abandoned the systematic teaching of Western civilization. My initiative, which I intend to speak to the board about in its October meeting, is to completely augment and change the 4-year graduation requirements for high school and transform them to 2 years of United States history and that's junior and senior year, preceded by 2 years of the history of Western civilization, ancient and medieval history 9th grade, European history 10th grade, economics, civics, and government can be taught within the historical context so that citizens understand where freedom comes from. Because the duties of a citizen are much greater than the duties of a slave in a tyranny who simply needs to learn how to obey. Finally, obviously I oppose Common Core. I think that the state and the localities can do better, but honestly, classroom teachers in the field, like myself, should be able to design their own curriculums, which I do, because I teach at the Coeur d'Alene Charter Academy. I'm accountable for results. I have to reference how these standards work, but ultimately I am the master of my classroom, I am the captain of my fate, and it was worth giving up my home with fresh lobster from the sea and fresh blueberries every autumn to come here to a school that allows me to do what I think my vocation is. And I wish that my colleagues in public schools could be freed from the shackles of Common Core. Thank you.
Kevin Corsand, Spirit Lake, Idaho, and that's going to be tough to follow. So yeah, I would like to just say that I oppose Common Core. I don't think it's right that the federal and then state is handing down basically how our students should be judged. I think that that needs to be done by the teachers, not necessarily at the higher levels. I fixed this problem. We homeschool. That's basically how I got around that. It cost us because my wife had to give up her career to do that, and it was worth every penny. So I encourage you guys if to undo this so that you can get back to, like so many of others have spoken to tonight, to where it needs to be at a local level where it's decided there, and there aren't these standards that they're trying to hold children to that aren't necessarily what is best.
Melanie's coming.
I do want to thank you for coming tonight and letting us come here and share our thoughts about Common Core. I'm just going to read a statement, and Idaho Core standards for Common Core. Of all the research that I have done on the subject, I believe it is not good for Idaho children, and the standards have done nothing to produce better education results. And researchers looking at national data and are starting to suspect that school children might have been better off if the standards were never adopted. So Common Core was adopted into our schools without any studies done ahead of time to see if it would be good for the children or not. So basically, we're guinea pigs, in my opinion. According to teacher Donita Brown says, it's a cognitive abuse to third grade and under children. She says it stresses out the children trying to meet these standards that have been set up when they are not mature enough to understand what they are required to do. And the standards are not developmentally appropriate. Our job is to protect our children. They have rights to. And I could go on and on about Common Core. I've done a lot of research on it for many years and have fought against it. And I see nothing good about it. So I am asking you to please take Common Core out of Idaho. So thank you so much.
Again,
again, thank you for coming and listening to us tonight. So my name is Teresa Ray. I'm a retired Army officer. I currently have a senior in high school and I have a 5th grader. I moved 14 times in 20 years on active duty. I retired in 2012. At the time, my 3rd grader, the last 3 years, moved from 3rd grade in Hawaii, went to Illinois 4th grade, and then came here to Idaho for 5th grade. I saw gaps in learning. The standards were not the same from state to state. The things that she needed to know in Illinois were not the same things that she needed to know in Hawaii, but she overlearned in Hawaii in math, so she had to repeat basically what she learned in Hawaii for the first semester of her 4th grade year because she was already taught that in 3rd grade in Hawaii. So I see it as it is a common standard across the states, and I look at it and I've seen the common standards. I've taught in our school district for 4 years. I taught computers. A standard for computers for kindergartners is to log on. That's a standard. It is to be able to identify a keyboard. There's nothing restrictive in that. I could teach that any way I wanted to teach that. By 5th grade, know 16 letters of the keyboard by learning your home row. I mean, the things that it's asking you to do just sets a standard. It doesn't tell you how to make that standard. So now I am in Bonners Ferry, Idaho. Great school district. Up there, it's kind of come full circle. We have a transient population up there. So where I was transient and my kids were transient, we now have a huge transient population up there that goes from Washington, Idaho, Montana, and all the way to North Dakota. And sometimes those kids come back and forth 4 or 5 times during the school year, the same kids. And so now, with the Common Core standard, there's no learning and there's no gaps in the learning. There's the same expectations from whether you're in 3rd grade that time and you've moved 4 times in that year. The same expectations are there for that 3rd grader, and hopefully they're getting taught the same things in all those school districts that they've been in as they go and come in our school district. So then we talk about the new math. So I have an undergrad in civil engineering, heavy math background. I love the new math. Oh, by the way, I am currently a school board member, so I don't know how it is in other school districts, but I know we adopt our own curriculum. We have curriculum teams that come together by teachers and agree on what curriculums to adopt. So if they don't like a new math and the teachers are like, that's hokey, we don't like that, they can adopt any curriculum they want to teach math. But I now have a 6th grader who just elected to take summer online course to move up to 8th grade math and accelerate. It's going a little too slow for her. She thinks she could do it, so we did it over the summer, and now she'll be placed into 8th grade math as a 7th grader. But I sit down with her and I see the new math. It's not new math. And what it's done is it enabled her to look at it from a different lens and teach her different ways to do the same problem. And I see it where I was by memory and by rote, and I kind of came to those conclusions later in math, where she's taught at a very early age on how to look at it from a different perspective with our math curriculum that we adopted in our school district. So maybe some of you don't have the same curriculum, but she's able to, at a very early age, be able to do some things I thought that I didn't start doing until 7th or 8th grade, and she's doing it in 4th, 5th, 6th grade. And then we talk about empowering the teachers. I feel like the teachers in our district are empowered. They know what the standards are. How they achieve those standards is up to them. And when we come up for curriculum reviews, they're like, well, this didn't work. We don't like that. We don't like the current curriculum, and other stuff has come out. We want to do this now. And they come together and they agree. They come to the board and they say, this is what we want to do. And as a board, we're like, heck yes. If that's what you want to teach, you're the experts. That's what we want you to teach. And then we look at it as, I see all the teachers. We have some great teachers in our district, but we have new teachers, and we have teachers who are not so great. And that's where, when they say, this is the curriculum we want that's going to achieve the end state that we're trying to achieve, this is the curriculum we're going to adopt, those teachers, whether you're new or you're not very good, know the standards and can use the curriculum, and we know that all the kids are getting the same education. Not that she had Mrs. Smith, and Mrs. Smith's a great teacher, but Mrs. So-and-so is not a great teacher, and now we have disparity in our own school district of basically the haves and have-nots. So again, thank you for, I gotta go to the bathroom. Thank you.
My name's pinpoint. I'm telling them that I have a little bit of a speech problem from the military. But I'm here tonight on behalf of my son. We moved quite a bit as he was growing up. From a private school up to private school. We never had a problem. When we moved back here, my wife said, let's put him in the public system. I said, okay, great. I didn't have a problem with it. A year and a half in, she's coming to me and she's saying, he's failing. I went to his teachers, I talked to his teachers, I said, what can we do? A year and a half later, I get a call from his principal saying, we have chat logs where he's talking about slashing his wrists. Well, there's quite a bit between that. But what it came down to was 2 months prior to her calling me, I had already pulled him out of school. Because I knew what was going on. I pay attention to my kid. I'm an executive for 3 Northwest companies. We employ about probably only 4,000 people. My goal is to have my son be able to be employed by my companies and actually become a part of the management team. I had seen in the Common Core system there was no way that was going to happen. He was failing. The teachers were pushing him through to hit their marks. I went back to the teachers and I said, how can we fix this? I can't have my son failing. They said, well, there's nothing we can do. I said, what do you mean there's nothing you can do? Tell me what I can do. There was no solution. A year and a half, no solutions offered. I understand the need, I shouldn't say need, the desire to standardize. We moved from Maui to Nebraska, all over the place. I understand that. But what the teachers are being asked, when I went to the teachers and I said, why is my son failing? How can you teach him? They had no way to do it. They didn't know how to teach him. They didn't know what they were being asked to teach. They couldn't explain to me, an executive of 3 successful companies, what they were teaching. And I finally, as a last-ditch effort, I pulled him out. He is back on track. He went to psychiatric care. We got him back on track over the course of a year. After this, I find out 5 of his friends almost ended up in psychiatric care, in mental health facilities, basically prisons, because they were failing and they felt that there was no way out. This is no way for smart kids to have to be raised. This is absolutely insane that we cannot go to our teachers and say, how can we help? Because there is such a gap between what they know and the system that they're being asked to use. So I'm here on his behalf because I feel that there are other kids out there struggling just like he did, and the parents aren't engaged. They don't know how to help them.
Thank you very much for being here this evening, and I appreciate your time. First and foremost, I'm speaking as a parent and then as an educator. As a parent, I'm very thankful for standards. I have twin 13-year-old girls that learn very differently. I want to thank, there's a teacher in the audience that had her this evening. I want to thank our teachers for all their hard work. As I sit here tonight, I become angry, and then I take a deep breath and realize that perception becomes reality. The reality is that the local school boards have the control to select the curriculum to teach the standards. That is set up and it's given that right, and there is that local control. Idaho was instrumental in creating the standards that are being discussed tonight, so the federal government would not tell us what to teach. So I would encourage anyone with that belief to please go back and research how those standards were created. In Boundary County and in any district I've been in, they start the day with the Pledge of Allegiance. Furthermore, our standards give us the opportunity to provide different approaches for our children to learn. As I said, I have 13-year-old daughters. One loves math and using the traditional algorithms. My other daughter struggled tremendously in math until she was provided the opportunity with a teacher in this room to learn math from different approaches. And through the Common Core, or I should say the Idaho standards, that has been allowed to occur. I thank our local school boards. I've worked in 3 districts that have approved curriculum that was really researched by teachers and recommended through a process adopted at the school board level. So please encourage our educators and teachers to do their job, allow parents to be involved, but please understand that our local school boards select the curriculum, not the state. Thank you.
My name is Kimberly Young, and I wanted to speak about the rules governing thoroughness. I am also a teacher in Post Falls, and I've been teaching 21 years. I am a certified teacher with the state of Idaho, but I represent a different group of people. I'm a private school teacher. I'm one of those teachers that we have to follow your state standards in order to keep our nonprofit status, but my kids are testing 2 and 3 grade levels above compared to public school. And we use traditional, Christian, constitutional curriculum. Now, when I first started in private school, I thought private school was all doctors and lawyers, and all my dads have oil under their nails. They're all blue collar, hardworking, giving up things because we're getting the phone calls from families where this didn't work. I'm getting the phone calls with tears and parents every day that my kid didn't fit in at what was going on in Post Falls School District. So we are taking them. We are not getting special education resources. We have been taught to go to the meetings. As an administrator, I go to the meetings and I sit there and they say, you are a nonprofit, we have all the resources for you, come on in. And then I never get a phone call for 6 months from the special education department to try to fix what was broken when the family came to us in tears. It's really frustrating. Every 5 years, the state of Idaho comes in and does an accreditation review for our state standards. And we get all of our marks and we hit all our points. On the record, they will say, you need to get rid of your Christian curriculum and you need to go more technology and you need to do this. But off the record, we really like what you guys have. But they can't say it because it's Christian and it's constitutional. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm the minority and I get very frustrated. One last thing. I have friends and family that are all public school teachers. I'm the black sheep and the family is the private school teacher. Many of your teachers are leaving their curriculum meeting, they are closing the door, and they're doing their very best to try to teach these kids. But I'm telling you, they're afraid they're gonna lose their jobs. They're just trying to do what they know at the core of them is to be a good teacher. They're doing their very best, but unfortunately many of them have had to drink the Kool-Aid and had to get up here and had to be pro-public education and pro-union, but they're just as much in tears. And I want that to be represented and heard, and I appreciate your time.
Did I miss anybody that indicated they wanted to speak?
I haven't indicated it yet, I walked in late.
Well, you're my next person. Is there anybody that signed up?
I signed up, I would like to speak.
Thank you.
name is Kenny Moore. I live in Hayden, and I agree with most of the comments that have been made against Common Core. I have a question for you, madam, to start. Does this state mandate Common Core now? I did research on it today. There's 50% of the opinion one way and 50% the other.
We have a set of minimum content standards that are originally based on what people refer to as Common Core. They've gone through 2 review processes where they've been amended based on input from educators and other individuals within the state of Idaho. So they are not exactly the same as what people refer to as Common Core that was adopted in 2011.
That's pretty clear. Thank you. In my research today, I've taught at 3 universities and 1 high school here in the state of Idaho. And I have talked to many of the high school students around here. In fact, one of the speakers here tonight had 3 students that I talked to last week. And it was absolutely a breathtaking fresh air to speak to them. They knew their subjects. They were absolutely articulate. They loved their school. And it does not go by Common Core. It's a private school. It was absolutely amazing because I've employed many other young men the last several years, and it's quite different. California started down this road when Common Core became known about 8 years ago. Since that time, their high school scores have constantly dropped each year since that time. When I graduated from college in the mid-60s, this nation led in the education things of engineering, technical sciences, math, some of the hard sciences, all the nations in the world. Today, we're down about 30. And it seems to be the result of our deteriorating education in this country. The process, which seems to be the most important process here in Common Core, is not to get the correct answer. They're evaluated as much on getting the correct answer as using the correct process. If I were a bank teller, I would be fired if I used that same process, where accuracy is absolutely required. Common Core is plugged in this state as a great thing. I strongly suggest that it isn't. Anything that's copyrighted, it has a problem in my mind, which is this Common Core concept is copyrighted. The last thing I want to mention tonight is this process itself has gone on for a long time, and it isn't producing the results that we need in this country. It needs to be changed. And I would like the state of Idaho to totally abolish it in the state. Thank you.